wonderful to see so many familiar faces. It's quite humbling to see so many unfamiliar faces. GCAS has grown to such an extraordinary degree just in the last few years that I'm astonished at how many of you I have not met. I look forward to meeting you. This is a threshold moment for GCAS. Up to this point, GCAS has developed in a series of phases. I wouldn't want to call them linear phases because the movement has been anything but linear, but there have been successive instantiations of the institution. It began, I think, more or less 7 years ago in the United States as a kind of incipient idea. It was housed for a time in Colorado and then in Michigan. And then the second phase began with a move across the Atlantic in a partnership with Alma Mater Europaea University in Maribor, Slovenia. And this was a time of growth and experimentation. And I believe the first summer institute with the movement away from that partnership. For a time, GCAS wandered for a bit like Israel in the desert, but found a new home in Dublin, Ireland. GCAS College Dublin now is the official name. And I would say that was the beginning of the third phase. And really in the last year or so, I think the institution has entered a fourth phase of significant global networking, now with connections in Central and South America through GCAS Latino America, in Africa with Uganda, developing connection in Ethiopia, in Australia, quite recently now a connection in Asia with Jakarta. And so this is really an extraordinary global institution that has developed. But I think what makes this event special is that for the first time that successive or quasi-linear movement has made its first loop or its first cycle. With you PhD candidates, you now as a cohort have completed your project or are very soon to complete it. And you have established now the first cycle so that all PhD candidates coming after you will in some sense be repeating your accomplishment. And so you are really in an extraordinary position of being the first full cycle of the institution in its degree granting capacity. The French philosopher Paul Ricoeur writes of an intermediate level of reference between the poles of individual memory and collective memory, where concrete exchanges operate between the living memory of individual persons and the public memory of the communities to which we belong. And I think as GCAS now steps into a kind of official institutional status, it's worth recalling the network of shared memories that we've made over the past years. And I'd like to just very quickly share a handful of memories that I have with you and that I hope some of you can recall as well in various ways. The first is the sweltering classroom in Maribor at AMEU in the summer with 2 students in person and then a handful, half dozen or so students connected via webcam. This is well before the age of Zoom when those kinds of connections were quite new. And we would go for 4, sometimes 5 hours straight working through Hegel's Science of Logic and the mathematics of category theory, sweating profusely, but so deeply engaged in an international, intercontinental connection that was something completely new, at least to me, in the sense of being able to participate directly in these connections using technologies that we now have all become much more familiar with. The second memory is a kind of diffuse constellation of memories that seems to cut across space and time. And this is the memory of the dancing and the shared meals at the various summer institutes over the past several years. That somehow it seems as if the dancing at those institutes was one continuous stream that somehow passed from Maribor to the Performing Arts Forum to Lacaille and was somehow a single revel, and the meals that we shared. And I think that this is a unique part of GCAS, this ability to share those kinds of deeply human, effective experiences. The collateral explorations that we've participated in, exploring a World War II bunker outside of Le Caillou, France, and meeting together at a medieval chapel with pagan carvings, and discussing them and looking at them and being present to this unique space. And then finally, a very particular memory of being dropped off in the middle of the French countryside in what felt like the middle of nowhere, and being greeted by a gruff elderly man wearing a hat that said "Trouble," and having him say, "Get in the car, I'll take you to the Performing Arts Forum." And that was my first meeting with Walter South, who very sadly this last year passed away. And this part of our collective experience is this possibility of collective loss. But just this last year, it struck me, I'm sure many of you remember Walter's hat of trouble, that it resonated for the first time with me with the passing of the great activist and politician John Lewis, and his notion of good trouble. And that this, I think, is something that binds us together as a community and as an institution, that we are committed to something like good trouble. So in conclusion, congratulations to all of you graduating today. And I would like to append to the informal GCAS motto, GCAS kick ass, the secondary phrase, good trouble. So GCAS, kick ass, good trouble.